Hi, welcome to Opera Happy Hour with Jeremy Frank. My name is Jeremy Frank. I am the Associate Chorus Master at LA Opera, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the third installment of this web series. Each week, I pick a theme based on the operatic repertoire and pair it with something from my home bar. Today's theme is love potions, both real and imagined. I wanted to choose this theme because it lets us have an opportunity to explore two really iconic operas in our repertoire. The first is Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, and the second, as it turns out, is a piece that requires a little tiny bit of knowledge of Tristan and Isolde, but is put to use for one of the best comedies in the Italian repertoire, Donizetti's L'Elixir d'Amore, or the Elixir of Love. Our pairing today is box red wine. Now, there is fancier red wine out there, but while we're in quarantine, this is part of the staples that we've got going. And you'll see when we start talking about L'Elixir that this is actually a premeditated choice and on purpose. And so pour yourself a glass of anything that tastes good to you, and let's start out on today's exploration. Cheers! The story of Wagner's Tristan and Isolde revolves around its two title characters. Tristan is the captain of a ship, and it is his charge to bring Isolde back to his home country, where she is engaged to marry King Mark. She had been engaged to a different person, and as we find out over the course of Act 1, Tristan, in fact, killed that man. When she learns of this, she flies into a rage, and she wants to kill him with a sword, but then suddenly she looks in his eyes and inexplicably can't follow through. Instead, she decides that she will concoct a potion out of the magical elements that she's brought on board on this ship. And she will force him to drink an atonement for his sins to her. In reality, she means to poison him, and then poison herself so that she can get out of this marriage that she doesn't want to do. It turns out that Brangena, her handmaiden, has caught wind of this, and instead of a poison, she's substituted a magical love potion so that Tristan and Isolde fall madly in love. And this is where things get truly, truly interesting. It, of course, sets up the tragedy for the rest of the opera, but also it gives Wagner an opportunity to figure out how he wants to musically depict two people being inebriated with new emotions. In this case, they're intoxicated with love that they wouldn't have chosen at the beginning of the opera and can't get rid of for the rest of the evening. And it's a magical kind of writing that happens. In the first episode, we talked about how Wagner tends to break Western music by not following any of the rules. And I thought I would take about 2 minutes to show you what the rules are so that you can appreciate just how revolutionary Wagner's music is. Let's start this way. Let's say I was going to sing any children's song that is really well known to you from the time you were like a toddler. I'll pick Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Let's say I did this. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a... You can't help but know what that last note is. And even if that were a melody that you had never in your life heard, because you've been exposed to essentially the amalgam of hundreds of years of music and know kind of how melodies tend to go, you could guess with 99% accuracy or more what the final note would be just by the way I set up the melody going there. We musicians have a term for this. These are called tendency tones because for every note on the scale, it has a probability of resolving one way or another. If we move beyond just simple melodies, harmonies work the same way. In fact, I'll play two very common harmony cadences that I think you'll probably recognize by ear. Imagine for a second that you're in church and we get to the end of a hymn and suddenly you hear this. I bet most of you know that the words that go with that are Amen. That progression, that harmonic progression, has a technical name. We musicians call it a plagal cadence, but it doesn't matter at all if you know what it's called. You kind of know which direction those notes are going to go. And in fact, that progression is like a one-way street. It only operates in one direction. If I made amen backwards, like men it doesn't sound final, it doesn't sound like the end of a sentence, it just sounds like I've meandered into some other path. There's another super common cadence that I'd like to introduce you to too. It has another name, an authentic cadence. And in this case, I'm going to cheat and use a slightly sullied version of it by playing the arpeggio that usually signals that we're about to sing Happy Birthday. That sounds like this. So between my arpeggio and the beginning of the song, those are two chords that function a different way, in this cadential way. Here it's the start of the song, but it can be the end of the song too. So one of the biggest ways that Wagner shows these two people being super intoxicated with newfound love is by ignoring every single rule, nearly as much as he possibly could in the confines of what music sounded like in the mid-19th century. I'd like to show you an example from the moment after Tristan and Isolde have swallowed the love potion, thinking that it's poison. And it's a very long orchestral interlude, full of murkiness and ambiguity about which direction things might possibly go. And while we do it, I'll give a little color commentary while we go to say what their subtext might be. But when they finally speak, the only thing that they can possibly say are each other's names. And that lingers for about 25 or 30 seconds, and then all hell breaks loose. And other people rush onto the scene. They say, finally, we've arrived. King Mark is here. He's ready to take you as his bride. And even that moment of tumult has no clear goal and just sounds harry-carry for a number of seconds. And I'll include that in this excerpt. Here's what all of that sounds like. Didn't I hate her about 30 seconds ago? Isn't that the guy who was a total loser? And yet, she's kind of hot. Uh-oh, I think I'm in love. Tristan Isolde, One of the most revolutionary aspects of Tristan and Isolde is the way that it ends. So after a bunch of time and another act or two, we finally get to the end of the piece. And Tristan and Isolde have been separated for a while. and Tristan has been fighting with various people and becomes mortally wounded. And as he lies on his deathbed, he's just waiting for Isolde to come and find him. Finally, she does, and he professes his love and expires. And what happens next is truly remarkable. She essentially sings the last 7.5 minutes of the show, which is referred to as the Liebestod. And for those of you who know German, you know that that is a compound noun made up of two German words, Liebe, meaning love, and Tod, meaning death. And essentially what happens is she wills herself to die so that she can be reunited with Tristan. The idea is so far out there that it really requires a special kind of music to go with it. Now, we were talking about how Wagner breaks the rules or pushes the rules just as far as they can go. He really was challenging people's understanding of how harmony could work. And to illustrate this, I'm going to teach you about how the middle piano on a grand piano works. The middle pedal does something special. If I play some notes and depress the middle pedal, it holds them as the sustain pedal would do, the right pedal would usually do, but it only holds those notes. So I can play other notes without them being sustained at all. Now, the reason I want to employ the middle pedal here is because Wagner uses a certain compositional technique. He will choose one tone out of every harmony, and he will extend it as long as he possibly can while harmonizing that note as many different ways as possible. So let's say he chooses the note C. He'll put that with a chord built on C, and then he'll make another chord that has a C in it but isn't a C chord, and then he'll do that 3 or sometimes 4 times. It's like if we were looking inside a kaleidoscope. If you were looking in a kaleidoscope, maybe you would see at the end a bunch of plastic pieces of different colors. Maybe there would be like a yellow triangle. The first chord shows the yellow triangle in one position. Then Wagner twists the dial a little bit and the yellow triangle moves. Some of the pieces from the first thing that you saw have gone out of view now and other things have come in. And so the yellow triangle is recontextualized. And then if we were to turn that kaleidoscope yet again, the yellow tile itself might soon be out of focus, but it might be a part of a completely different picture. Wagner accomplishes this orally by reharmonizing the same note as many times as he can. It's like pulling taffy until it almost breaks. He stretches it just as far as it can go, and when it's done, he meanders a little bit till he finds a new central note to build the process on again. I've already given it away. This whole thing lasts for 7.5 minutes. And let me sort of show you what those individual units sound like. This all comes from the famous aria at the end of the piece, as I've mentioned, whose title is Mild und leise. And for our purposes, I'm only going to play the orchestral parts. The vocal part is also very beautiful. It sometimes is just like the orchestra, sometimes not. But if you really want to get an idea of it, you can listen to a recording. For now, I'll show you first the pieces and then how he makes magic out of those pieces. So, let's say this is our first magical note that's going to be pulled apart like taffy. That goes with this harmony. It also goes with this harmony. And this harmony. And by then, Wagner is pulled as far as he can. So he goes to that chord. Then he starts with a new central note, this note. And then he harmonizes it first with this harmony, then this harmony, then this harmony. And again, the taffy has been pulled as far as it can go. And if we take this pulling and this never-ending meandering from place to place that occurs while Isolde is transfiguring herself so that she can join Tristan in death. That the first a minute and a half of that sounds like this. As I mentioned earlier, The Elixir of Love by Donizetti is an opera whose plot really is set off by the story of Tristan and Isolde. So these two pieces are inextricably linked, even though Elixir of Love was written first. Of course, Tristan and Isolde was a famous story that was well known in Europe at the time. What happens is this. There is a poor peasant named Nemorino, and he is in love with this wealthy, beautiful, rich landowner named Adina. She is just the bee's knees. She is also educated, and that matters because it means that she's literate and can read. So one afternoon, she's reading to all of her workers, and what she is reading is the story of Tristan and Isolde. Nemorino, who has longed for her and pined for her for years, hears this story and realizes what he needs to do. He needs to find somebody who can sell him the same kind of magic elixir that happens in Tristan and Isolde. And with it, he will be able to get Adina's attention and she will have to love him. Just as luck has it, a quack traveling salesman, Dulcamara, comes to town and he's selling this magical elixir. Now, for most people, he's selling it for whatever ails them. If they have a bad back, he sells them the elixir. If they have headaches, he sells them the elixir. When he meets Nemorino, and Nemorino tells him that he needs Isolde's elixir of love, suddenly this magic elixir is that elixir. In reality, it's really cheap wine, which is why I wanted to pair boxed wine with today's theme. And that deserves a little sip. So, unlike actual boxed wine, which you can buy for like a couple bucks, Nemorino gives all of his hard-earned money to Dulcamara to buy this magical elixir. And to try and prevent Nemorino from realizing that it's not real and so he can get out of town, Dulcamara tells him that it takes 24 hours to take effect. And of course, Nemorino can't wait at all, so he downs the entire bottle all at once. And if earlier I was saying Wagner had an opportunity to depict how people sound when they are inebriated or intoxicated with love, Donizetti absolutely does not miss the opportunity to show you how people sound when they are inebriated with simple boxed wine masquerading as magic elixir. It's pretty funny. It sounds like this. La 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 So, Nemorino has taken the elixir, and because of that, he feels very, very confident, almost to the point of cockiness, because he knows no matter what he does, Adino has to fall in love with him the very next day. So he starts feigning indifference to her as if she doesn't really matter or she's not really all that. Adina notices, and it piques her fury a little bit, and she decides that she wants to teach Nemorino a lesson. She does so, kind of in an extreme way, by telling him that she's going to marry the sergeant of the army the very next day. And of course, Nemorino freaks out. The next morning, he goes running to look for Dulcamara to ask him to sell him some more magical elixir so that he can ensure that Adina will fall in love with him, because clearly it has not worked yet. Dulcamara says, "You don't have any more money. You paid me everything you had yesterday." So Nemorino has the idea that he should sign up for the army for its signing bonus, and that's how he'll pay for more elixir. Now, those of you keeping track will remember that the person that Adina is going to fake get married to is the sergeant of the army. So this whole thing is super eggy at best. Nemorino signs up for the army. He gets the money. He takes it to Dulcamara, who sells him a second bottle of elixir. And of course, there's no time to waste. So Nemorino downs the second bottle, and by this time, he's feeling pretty inebriated. Well into Act 2, we end up hearing him sing in a quartet. And at first, he's talking about what his plan is and how he's taken this elixir, and Dulcamara has assured him that he's going to get the woman of his dreams. All the other girls of town are noticing that Nemorino's acting a little out of character because he's kind of drunk. And so they start giggling and pointing at him and giving him some attention. Nemorino mistakenly takes that as proof that the elixir is working for real. And you can hear in this musical excerpt that I want to play from the beginning of the quartet, with my own English translation, thank you very much, you can hear a couple ways that Donizetti paints Nemorino as inebriated. First, there are sudden, dramatic, dynamic accents that happen, as if suddenly he can't help but talk loud, and then suddenly he's talking like a normal level. And so that is the first clue that things are maybe not going super well. And then, as soon as he finishes his line and other people start singing, in the orchestra, you can hear Donizetti poking fun at Nemorino not being able to stand steadily on his feet. And when we get there, I'm not going to sing anything. I'm just going to play what is essentially a tipsy waltz. I've nearly finished the bottle of magical elixir. Dulcamara promised me that it would get me the girls, that it would surely get me the girls. The only woman I really want is my beloved Adina. I can already tell that it is having its effect. So after Nemorino makes quite a big scene and a fool out of himself, Adina can't figure out why he's acting so out of character. She approaches Dulcamara to ask him what's happening, and without realizing that he's talking about her, he tells her that he's sold Nemorino this magical elixir so that he can get the attention of some scornful woman who won't give him the time of day. Adina realizes what's happened, and she feels awful about it. And because of that, she realizes that she's been in love with Nemorino the whole time, and she cries just a little. Her eyes get misty, and one little tear happens. And Nemorino spies that from afar, and it causes him to sing one of the most famous tenor arias that exists. It's a curious little piece. It's called Una furtiva lagrima. And you've almost certainly heard it before, though you've never heard it with voce di coche, which is what we in the industry refer to as my frog-like coach voice. I'm going to sing it down, not in a tenor octave. I'm just going to sing it because it's a pretty melody. But there are a few things that you should know before I do. The beginning of this aria has a very famous bassoon solo. And so as I play it in its entirety, you'll have to imagine that my right hand is as mournful and sweet sounding as a bassoon. But that leads me to the other reason that this is such an unusual aria. It sounds sad. And yet, it definitely depicts the moment that Nemorino realizes that his love is reciprocal. So he's actually ecstatic. And Donizetti paints this in a pretty simple but beautiful way. The aria starts in a minor key and stays that way for several phrases. So in some ways, Donizetti might be depicting Nemorino's empathy for how bad he feels that Adina is feeling bad. Nevertheless, his joy triumphs, and he finishes both verses of this aria by switching to the major key. And you'll be confused. I'm going to sing this in Italian. When I get to the part that sounds like I'm saying mama, oh mama, I'm not talking about mom. I'm singing the Italian words, she loves me. And it's like that first moment when you realize that somebody who you've loved for a long time loves you back. It's an amazing feeling. And one of the best things about this whole show and its happy ending is that the nice guy with all of the earnestness and steadfastness actually gets the girl. That super beautiful moment sounds like this. Please remember, we of course are a not-for-profit at LA Opera, and we appreciate any support that you can give us at this time or other times. And I know I've given shout-outs to other not-for-profits that are involved in raising funds for artist relief, and other local companies who really appreciate any patronage that they can get right now. So please keep us in mind. Other than that, I can't wait to see you next week. The show is going to be mocktails to accompany fairy tales set in opera, and I can't wait to join you and maybe give our livers just a little bit of a break. Have a great week. Thanks again.